touchdown that they scored, or the first touchdown that they scored at least, was on a punt return. So it was a special teams gave it up. It wasn't necessarily the Vikings defense. So, basically they allowed right around 11 points in that game, whatever. Again, that should be good enough to win. But, the offense too, there was so much being said about Sam Bradford and that Vikings offense, and they were outplaying these great, or Sam Bradford was outplaying these great quarterbacks, but they're not facing that great Minnesota Vikings defense, which it's still, even after in a loss, in a losing effort, I think they are. Again, they gave their offense plenty of opportunities to win, but kind of maybe slower roll on maybe on hyping up that Vikings offense right now, because there was a few situations that I've seen. I was just watching Red Zone today, that I think they missed Adrian Peterson in those short yard situations that I think would have helped them, and not knocking Asiata and McLennan by any means. I think they're decent backs, but obviously not a dominant force that Adrian Peterson is. So it was nice to see the Vikings finally lose a game. So that was nice. The Oakland Raiders getting that win on the road in Jacksonville. Kind of worried about that. Wonder if they were going to gain a little bit of momentum after kind of that's come from behind victory against the Chicago Bears the week before, and also that performance they put up in London a few weeks ago too versus the Indianapolis Colts. But it's one of those things, man. I don't know. Maybe it's the vibe that's in Oakland right now too. That it sounds like they, Mark Davis wants them to move to Las Vegas, but yet Roger Goodell wants them to stay in Oakland. So there's that little bit of a feud going on in the Raider family right now. So maybe that's why they can't win at home. But they've looked, those games, they look pretty pitiful at home. But again, 5-2 so far, leading the AFC West, and they're off to a good start. It kind of a lot of it depends on what happens tomorrow night when the Denver Broncos face off against the Houston Texans. But even at a 5-2 Broncos team, and how great that defense is, I mean, I don't know. I still thinking about it, it's probably a toss-up between those two teams, because I think the Raiders' offense is so high-powered that they could almost beat anybody week to week, and then the same thing can be said with the Broncos or defense, is that they're so dominant, kind of like the situation that the Vikings are in, that they can pretty much beat anybody week to week. But we've seen that offense struggle so badly, kind of like the Vikings did this Sunday. We've seen that last Thursday when they played the San Diego Chargers, that they struggled tremendously after kind of looking pretty much unbeatable, I guess you could say. But maybe we can say it was because Gary Kubiak was out. And from all indications that I know, that he will be back on the sidelines on tomorrow night. Hopefully, and maybe that will help the Broncos. I don't know how much that helped or hurt them, but I guess we'll find out tomorrow night. I do need a very good performance by the Broncos defense against Texans, because it's been a frustrating fantasy football season in almost all my leagues. It's been very up and down, but this particular league, I mean, I have no shot at getting into the playoffs by any means. I'm 1-5, but you can't give up. You got to keep digging. I'm not one of those guys that's gonna just abandon the league because, for one, it takes you 2 seconds. I mean, even if you don't sit there on the waiver wire trying to get the best players week in, week out, just take 2 minutes, get a healthy body in there, and hope for the best. Hopefully, to put forth some effort. Plus, I'm always in the mindset too. I'd like to play the spoiler. If I can go out there, if I finish the season 1-10, or going in last week 1-10, and I'm playing the best team in the league, I want to say I messed up his number 1 seed going into playoffs. You can play the spoiler. You gotta like that. But man, oh man, just a lot of sloppy plays too. I think it was with the New York Jets and the Baltimore Ravens, where the Jets recovered a fumble, then they fumbled, and the Ravens got it back, gave them another opportunity. Just, we were watching the Red Zone, the wife and I, today, and at first it was, she did go to me like, well, seems like there's a pretty sloppy day in football. And I'm like, well, we're still just kind of new to watching basically the Red Zone week in, week out. And I really didn't know. I'm like, well, maybe it's because we're seeing it all happen at one time. And that still could be. I mean, if someone out there that has Red Zone would get a hold of me and tell me that this happens more often than not, that you just see these constantly, these fumbles or interceptions or these turnovers within like a 5-minute span on Red Zone. But then after a while, I'm like, well, maybe it's right. And I think what did clinch it for me to decide that this week of football was just straight up and down. I think you can even go back to that Thursday game with the Packers and the Bears on both sides of both teams on that one. That it was just filled with sloppy play. You even look at the New England Patriots. They did win 27-16, but they didn't look like the dominant New England Patriots that they were. But the 6-6 tie tonight with the Seattle Seahawks and Arizona Cardinals maybe sealed the fate of how sloppy this week was. We still do have that game tomorrow, so I don't know what that means for that. Maybe now we're done with sloppy football. But I mean, besides those missed kicks at the end of regulation, and missed kicks all night long for maybe the Arizona Cardinals, and that last missed kick for the Seattle Seahawks. You take those sloppy plays out. I've heard Skip Bayless go on his take field goals out of football rant again tonight. But, man, oh man, there was bad plays by both offenses. There were sloppy plays by both defenses to even get in those situations where the Seahawks and the Cardinals got into field goal position. There were sloppy plays. Richard Sherman slips on a route that he basically had the receiver blanketed. They had J.J. Nelson blanketed, slipped, and it appeared that the Cardinals were going to win. And a defense that Russell Wilson had no answers to all game long. All of a sudden, that last drive looked like they were just slicing through it like butter. I mean, I understand going for the kick as early as the Seahawks did, but just the way that night went, it was almost like maybe go for. I mean, maybe I know I'm saying this too because I had Russell Wilson in my fantasy league and I wanted him to get a few more points in that game that I almost should have won, and I probably won't unless the Broncos have an awesome night tomorrow. Broncos D. But to go for the win, maybe, man, even the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals do something. Protest that run that David Johnson had at the end of that game. That would have killed my fantasy team, by the way. It looked like David Johnson maybe had that touchdown. Go for the touchdown. I know the book says, you got to kick it on third down in case something happens. But a lot of the times that I've seen bad stuff happen on kicking a field goal basically happen in both those situations. They just miss it. There was, for the Cardinals, I understand it maybe a little bit more because you had that week 1 botch snap when you could have beat the New England Patriots week 1. But for the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, I don't know if they had many botch snaps. I think they did have one, actually. I do actually remember one with either last year or 2 years ago. And wasn't that like when John Ryan got a concussion, I think? So this happened before in recent history. But anyway, I think you rarely see the slim chances that these plays happen, where you botch a snap and maybe the holder can just throw it out of bounds. I think 9 times out of 10, if something bad's going to happen out of a field goal, they're just going to flat out miss it. So maybe get as close as you can, take as many chances to put that dagger in them, because we may be seeing what happened. And I guess maybe I'm fighting, or that's maybe kind of the ideals of what Skip Bayless wanted, to take your kicker out of the game But I still think there's so many opportunities, so many good games that probably could have been taken away if there were no points allowed, no field goals, that wouldn't even been in great situations. You look at maybe some of these games that were played today, if none of these teams could kick a field goal and they just turned over the ball because they couldn't score, just because it's a scoring drive and someone kicks a field goal doesn't mean there's going to be more points, doesn't mean there's going to be more exciting games. You're probably going to see a lot more of what you've seen tonight. I think if you take out field goals, just because, and especially your examples after a game that had some terrible kicks in it, I mean, that is true. But I think you see more of a product of what you see tonight if teams are having trouble scoring. Sometimes maybe I'm saying this because the Packers offense, they can move down the field, but they can't really punch in the end zone. And actually that's the case too. If you look at the Dallas Cowboys game, Cowboys versus Packers a few weeks ago, it was 30-16 to the most part of the extent that you could, as a fan, you could bend it and contort it to being a game probably up until like 3 minutes to go in that ball game. If you take field goals kicking out of that game, we're probably talking about that game being over by halftime. And I think a lot of games you would see that similar scenario where, maybe a team's getting a field goal position and they're trailing a team, 14-9, and they might have that one last shot at the end of the game to score the touchdown to win. But you take those field goals out, those 3 field goals that team's got, it's a 14-0 ball game. It's not going to be that exciting of a game. So I think in the end of the day, you make the game more boring by taking field goals out of it. I mean, I would have to. There's probably someone out there that could do a study of maybe the percentage of chances that you make it on 4th down, especially if you're talking about 4th and 30s or something like that. So I think we are seeing a lot more teams now too, with I think the lack thereof good kickers going for it a little bit more on 4th down. Look at the Atlanta Falcons too in overtime. That was kind of a crazy call too. Instead of punting it, that wasn't not necessarily a field goal option there, but going for it on 4th and 1, not converting, giving the San Diego Chargers great field position. They got themselves in position to kick a field goal and they won that one in overtime. That game could have probably ended in a tie too. I don't know how exactly the points were scored in that game, but if you take away field goals and that. So it is just, to me, I probably shouldn't have been talking about it as long as I did, but I did. So that being said, I believe Tuesday is the start of the World Series. You do have the Cleveland Indians. Man, is that going to be a championship team again? Kind of maybe the scrappy team. They're not going to be as talented. Really didn't even think a lot of people didn't even think they were going to get past the Toronto Blue Jays. Torch them in that series, 3-1. The Chicago Cubs kind of defying fate after being down 2-1 to the Dodgers, win the series 4-2, and advance to the World Series for the first time since 1945. And all indications, I think, are, even despite the fact that the Cleveland Indians will open up with home field advantage starting, I believe on Tuesday night. Not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure it will be Tuesday night because the series, if needed to be, would have went to tonight, and I think the Game 7 might have been Monday, or the travel day is probably Monday. But, because they played 6 games. So if Game 7 would have been tonight, you would have the travel day. So, Tuesday is when the World Series starts. So, 2 things that go into that. You do have maybe the underdog Cleveland Indians now that are in a bit of a pickle spot here, too, because they get that rest. They got that rest because they ended their series, I believe it was on Thursday or Friday, that series was over. Now, you have to almost wait a full week to start your World Series game. And after, basically since spring training started, back in March, they've been, through a routine. And I know that these guys were probably kept loose, this past week, but still might be a little bit different when you're playing playing the game itself, and where the Chicago Cubs just got done with their series. But I think